Hi, everyone. It's a very, very rainy, floody Tuesday. If you see me floating up, it's because there's water coming into our basement right outside my door. I think we've got it stopped and barricaded for a while, at least for the next 45 minutes while I'm here. But we hope everybody is also safe and healthy. If it's not raining and flooding, we're certainly all living in the pandemic, a new way of life. And as John and I were talking about before, and we sort of live in, we hope we don't die, but we live, we thrive for this conversation, for these things about what the future is. And I love John's next book. It's going to be FutureNEXT. And that's why you're here. That's why we probably have so many people that were interested in being here, is about what's next. And we certainly are living in an age of acceleration and change and whatever else we want to talk about. So before we get to that, I just want to pull up a couple things here. A couple housekeeping things. Obviously, everyone has found the chat so far. Please let us know where you're calling from, where you are, where you're located. You can also post questions there, but I prefer, just so we can get them, if you have a question that you want to ask, and we're going to have time for Q&A, there's a button on the bottom, or a tab on the bottom, that says quick ask a question. And it looks like this if you click on it, and you can post your question in there, and that way we can keep tabs of them. In fact, there's a way to upvote those. If 2 or 3 people have the same question, you can basically vote on it and they raise to the top. So we'll get to those first. But appreciate everybody being here. Again, this will be a lot of fun. I've been anticipating this. I followed John for the last couple of years. My TED Talk, John is part of Singularity University. He's actually Africa's first faculty member there, and represents that. So that's quite an accomplishment. But my TED Talk had a lot of influence, for those who've seen it, was Make Change Work for You. Had a lot of influence from Peter Diamandis and Kurzweil. So a lot of, again, the theme you'll recognize. If you didn't know where it came from, you'll see the theme. So I appreciate that very much. I'm going to close this a little bit. Just a couple quick things here. My company is Success Performance Solutions. We're sponsoring these. We have a couple great webinars, and I'm so happy that John was here today to kick it off. There's John. We'll come back to him in a minute. Next week, we've got Dr. Diane Hamilton. This fits into our conversation today. John wasn't aware of this, but she's written a book, Cracking the Curiosity Code. And we're all innately curious, but as adults, as parents, as teachers, as business managers, we screw it up. We crush it. We take it down. And she looks at what are the 4 reasons. There's 4 factors that she's identified, has a lot of research from this. And she's identified 4 reasons that get in the way. One of them's fear, which is no biggie, but you'll have to attend next week to figure that out. And there's also an assessment that goes along there. We're giving that away. The following week, another fascinating topic, Dr. Solange Charas. She's does a lot with business intelligence, analytics, works in the HR space. And she's identified, she's doing a lot of work in diversity and inclusion and equity these days. What she's identified is that although a lot of organizations are focused on diversity and inclusion, they got the numbers right, they've got the sectors right, they're doing the right things, there's engagement. The problem is not everybody has equal opportunity. And without equal opportunity to advance, to accept some of those things, that's a problem. And so she's done some analytics, and it's how you can, within your organizations, ensure that everybody has an equal opportunity for those. And then the final one, we're finishing up our series, our leadership series on rebuilding workforce knowledge with Dr. Edward Gordon. And the other ones are, this is the 4th in a 4-part series. So you can register for any of those on Crowdcast. You'll be getting my emails. If not, and I will post that in a call to action. But so hopefully you get there. But meanwhile, we've got John Sanei. I really appreciate him being here. There we are. There's his books. You can capture those. He's working on a 4th book, which you'll be excited to talk about. But it's What's Your Moonshot, Magnetize, and Foresight. John is what he calls himself a knowledge mercenary who travels the globe to uncover lessons needed to shift communities and help humanity thrive. And we all need that in this time. He's, as I mentioned, he's Africa's first faculty member at Singularity University in San Francisco. He's a lecturer at Duke Corporate Education in Johannesburg. And if you haven't, when you hear him speak, you'll know he's from South Africa. He just told me right before the show he actually went to the same school as Trevor Noah. So he set the ground for that. And he's a partner at the Copenhagen Institute of Future Studies. Welcome, John.
Thank you so much. Wonderful to be here and to meet all the good people up there on that side of the world. I'm obviously on the other opposite side of the world right now in Cape Town. So hello to everybody. And Ira, thank you so much for having me.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Hey, one of the things, I gave you a little hint on this because I know it's a tough question, but we're going to talk about what the future is like. One of the things one of the questions I want to start out with is you study this, you study change, you're trying to anticipating this, you're trying to learn. Is there anything that really seemed odd or unexpected during this pandemic? I mean, anything that really surprised you, that got you off guard?
An odd question, and I like it because I've never actually been asked it. I think the pandemic itself is as odd as it gets. The first time I heard that Italy was going into shutdown, it was the first time I'd ever heard of 60 million people going into shutdown. That was really odd for me in many different ways. The second thing that I find really odd is something that we have termed the Corona Coaster here in South Africa. I'm not sure if it has the same name there in the States, but the Corona Coaster is this incredible roller coaster of emotions that everybody's going through. You are pinging between despair and hope, and this lack of anchor into the future has many of us exhausted, and our emotions are really at the end of their wits in many, many different people's lives. So for me, the odd thing is this inability to understand the future and not have an anchor into it is by far the oddest thing, because I don't think any of us have ever had this situation happen to us where we're not looking forward to a holiday. We're not looking forward to, we actually don't even know what to look forward to because there is no end date to any of this.
So yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I don't know. I think everything feels odd. I'm not sure there's any particular exceptions other than, I guess, the shutdown to us, that we shut down. And it's amazing how well people adapted. But we anticipated both in your books and in my book, Recruiting in the Age of Googlization, we talk about how we expected this from technology. We expected the shift in work and attitude, and it was going to be a gradual thing, and we were going to have to contend with the bureaucracies and the attitudes and the status quo and the resistance to change. But overnight, people were forced to figure this thing out. So we're there. I connected with you. Again, I followed you for a while, but I connected with you because just a few weeks ago, you put out a video that talked about simplicity or the movement from simple to complicated to complex. And there was an article years ago, I can't remember where, it was probably HBR or Harvard Business Review or something on that order. But one of the things was that it was about how we need to shift our mindsets. And so you had a really brilliant explanation of that. If you can share that, and we'll take that because we want to talk about within that context, what has to change with the future of work, future employees, and leadership.
Well, look, as a futurist and somebody that's always been interested in the future, I find it really tough that there is absolutely no certainty about what's to come. It's almost as if all the trends have been put out and have been postponed or canceled in some way. And we are now finding ourselves in a totally uncertain world. And so that any time that you are suffering from uncertainty and you don't know what is to come, the only thing you can manage is your behavior. And where you're able to manage your behavior, that becomes the key for you to thrive in a world that the paradigm and the rules and laws have changed for life and business. So the idea around complexity and complicated world, I'm not even going to go into simple because it's from far away, but let's start off with complicated to complex, because I think that's the real crux of it. The reason we are in this sort of predicament or in this sort of new state is that every business has three pillars: the pillar of forecasting, planning, and executing. And what has happened now is that the forecasting pillar has lost its traction. It's lost its power. The world's best futurists claim they can see 400 years in the future, 400 days in the future. And many of us can only see maybe a month or 2 months into the future because there's so much changing all the time. And the reason is that we have now squarely and firmly moved into a complex world. The world we came from, we were able to preempt the future based on past patterns. So let's look at what it means to be a complicated world. A complicated world has patterns, but these patterns are repeated. These complicated patterns can be worked out using mathematics and automation. And ultimately, these patterns become automated because they are just a set of repeated patterns. And that's what mathematics loves so much. Complexity, on the other hand, has very intricate patterns, but they are not repeated. So you cannot use maths and automation to work yourself out of complex situations. And so what we need is we need to focus and realize that the world of complicated is a very different beast in as far as what you focus on. In a complicated world, you want to focus on hyper efficiency to bring about productivity and profitability. In a complex world, you need to focus on robustness and longevity. You need to express yourself in many different versions. And so the analogy that I used in the video that you're talking about is when you arrive at an airport and you put your suitcase onto the conveyor belt, what happens is that the suitcase moves towards the plane, finds itself onto the same plane that you're on, hopefully, but most probably it does, utilizing automation, mathematics, and patterns that repeat themselves, hardly coming into contact with another human being, mostly automated. Why? In a complicated world, you focus on efficiency and getting to target. Now, you get onto the plane. The plane now is not going to be dealing with a complicated world. It's going to be dealing with a complex world. In other words, when the plane is up in the air, you have no idea what's coming at you. Will a bird fly into the engine? Will 3 of the engines malfunction? Will 2 of the pilots pass out? Will there be a lightning strike? We don't know. So what happens when you get onto a plane? The plane is built for complexity, not complications. And so because you have no patterns that are repeating, you have 4 engines when 1 is enough. You have 5 operating systems in case 1 breaks down or 1 falls away or 1 malfunctions, in case some new problem arises up there in the sky. And finally, you have 4 pilots when 1 is enough, in case one of the pilots has a bit of trouble. So we have to realize that we have moved from a world of just in time to a world of just in case. We need to realize that the just-in-time scenario was focused on efficiencies. The just-in-case is a world that we cannot preempt what the future will look like. And so what we need to realize is that as a baker, you can't just bake bread anymore. You have to have a YouTube channel. You have to teach a course on how to bake bread. You have to sell flour that you grow yourself in the farm where you come from. You have to have an apron range that you can sell to people. You need to have a robust expression of how you come forward into the world. And whatever business you're in, the more robust you are in your expression, the more chance you have to thrive rather than just merely focus on one sector and try and survive.
We've been talking with for the last 4 months. We've had a once-a-month series on the future of employability. And my friend, Dr. Ed Gordon, has studied this for 50 years. And with that, his last book was Future Jobs. He's working on a new white paper on that. And it was about the skill shortages. And, you know, I've said this over and over again. Anybody listening to my podcast, you've probably heard it, is that sometime, at least for the US, sometime in March, when everybody was sent home, people used to have their job, they had their title, they had their skill sets, they had their expertise, they had their niche. And all of a sudden, parents became teachers at home. Basically, they had to become office designers because they had to figure out a way to cut that out. But most importantly, it really was this acceleration into a technology age, to digital age. It should have happened before, because everyone had to figure out, how do we get 4 people using the same bandwidth? How do we use Zoom? How do we connect things? Our computer's not working. Some people had one computer for the family because everybody else had, went to work, and they shut their devices off when they went home, and all of a sudden they had to have those. So overnight, almost everyone, whether they were a server in a restaurant, whether they were IT, whether in sales management, obviously call centers have been using this for a while, whatever job they had, they immediately had to acquire a new set of skills. And as you said, move from a world, they thought their world was complicated before and moved to a more complex world. There was another definition, and again, I can't remember the article that this came from. You might recall it, but they talked about complex or complicated was known unknowns, and complex is unknown.
That's right. Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah. Look, and also this comes down to how we're preparing ourselves and how we're preparing our children, because we have to realize that the subject matter that our children are learning have really got nothing to do with a complex world. They've got everything to do with a complicated world. And so we have to realize that the subjects need to change. What we need to be focusing on need to change. And so we almost have to become incredibly fluid rather than rigid. And that adaptability, or the AQ quotient, becomes the most important quotient. And we got to see that it's not survival of the quickest anymore. I mean, it's not survival of the fittest anymore. It's survival of the quickest. The quickest you can shift and unlearn and move, that becomes your magic power in this new world.
Right. And I love the fact that you brought up the AQ. That's something that a number of us are working on. I do a lot of work with Cornerstone On Demand. I write for their publication. I interviewed Dr. Heidi, or not doctor, but Heidi Spierge just a few weeks ago. She's their VP of marketing and strategy. Or she's not VP, she's chief strategy and marketing officer. So she'll hit me for saying she's a VP. But they're working a lot on adaptability, that AQ, that adaptability quotient. I know you talk about
the very structure of an organization is a hierarchical one. And often organizations want to be adaptive, but really the truth is that the structure itself is built for efficiency, not adaptability. And so we have to move from an organization that's hierarchical to networked. It's a very different structure. And I think many organizations are on this drive or strive for digital transformation and agility. But often what they have to really do is start something on the side that's built on a different structure that competes with them in the hierarchical process, and then move people over slowly into a more network position. So it's something that many, many organizations are trying, but very few are getting right because of the very structure and notion of what a corporation is set up to do.
So one of the things, let's put this in context of employees. What's the future? I know, I mentioned with next week we're going to be talking about curiosity, and I know that's an important part of what you do. And in order to be adaptable, there's so many things that curiosity is the driving force. You can't be adaptable if you're not curious, because you don't know what you're adapting to. But you talk a little bit about that. So put that in the framework, because you followed. I don't know if it was the next one, but you also followed that video you had about complicated and complex with about students, about kids. How can we help their passion? And obviously that's where the curiosity exists, and then we crush it because you have to get straight A's. You have to be perfect. You have to achieve all this, and we take away that thirst for curiosity. So talk about that a little bit, and then in addition to that, what are some of the other skills that you believe we need to embed, not only our kids, but basically everybody right now is sort of on what's the next step in everybody's career, unless you're an older boomer like me who actually owns his own business, so it's fine. But if you're looking to continue to work, what are the skills you're going to need?
Great question. Thank you. So I always like to give context and to zoom out a bit. And if we think about what's the world we live in right now, some people are calling it the surplus society. In other words, what we have today in the world of work is a surplus of similar skills. And so what has happened is that the Industrial Revolution, many, many years ago, created the roles that we needed to play to fit into the cog of the machine when it came to the production line, where you needed efficiency and profitability over everything else through the process and the doctrine of growth. That was economies of scale that the Industrial Revolution spoke about. But today, we find that millions and millions of people around the world have studied the same things. So you have millions of accountants and millions of lawyers and millions of engineers, and you just have such a surplus of people with similar skills. Now, all these people were purely intended. They went out there to get the degrees because those are the ideas and stories of success that our society and education have told us for the longest time. And as you said, curiosity was never part of that. Curiosity was set aside for your hobbies. And what you were told to do and tasked to do was try and fit into the 10 careers that were available to us at university. But where we find ourselves today is that when you are in a surplus society and your skills are commoditized, what happens? You just get pushed down for price, as well as any of these left brain skills are also getting automated very, very quickly. So we must realize that the future of work is much more about curiosity, because the future post-COVID will, I believe, become a new renaissance for us as humanity. And just like the Italian Renaissance started to celebrate beauty, art, and knowledge, we are going to see the celebration of uniqueness, authenticity, and our humanness. And in this new world of networked internet circles and tribes and groups and fans, what you're able to do is build a very successful business based on this new notion of your curiosity leading to your authenticity and your uniqueness. The world that we're moving into requires us to stand up and stand out from the rest of the world, because if we are same, we're then able to thrive in a world where the Industrial Revolution doesn't matter anymore, where we move from a world of economies of scale to economies of learning. How quickly can you unlearn to relearn? How quickly can you preempt what your customers want? And how much can you stay in a process of flow so you can be naturally adaptable and naturally optimistic? And curiosity is your gateway into accessing your genius. And we've all got a very unique makeup. All of us are very, very interested and curious about very unique things. Our expression of those things become our superpower in a world post-COVID-19. So what I believe is, I've researched and running a masterclass on the 10 subjects we should be teaching our children as well as ourselves, but let's just keep this for the children, is one of them is, how can you teach somebody how to be passionate? And the truth is that it's very difficult to be passionate if you haven't been exposed to many different types of careers. Because think about it, when you were growing up and I was growing up, our kids were only exposed, or we were only exposed to our parents' careers and maybe our parents, our friends' parents' careers. So we didn't really have much exposure. But imagine that we had a subject at school where it got kids to look up different careers and make a presentation to the class every month about a career that really excited them, their pros, the cons, the videos, the ideas around that career. And then the next month they had to present another one. What this does, it exposes our children or even ourselves to a lot more options out there. And in that process, gives us a better inkling of what we could be passionate about. And that becomes the key here, is that many of us have never even given ourselves the chance to ask ourselves, what makes us most curious? And could that make us money? And the story has always been that it can't make you money. But in this new world, that's exactly what's going to make you money. Because when you're in a state of flow, in a state of curiosity, in a state of excitement, you have constant energy, you have constant ability to create, be innovative, to collaborate, because nobody else is competing against you because you're so unique. Another subject I think is really important for our kids and even for ourselves is grit. And so how do you teach grit? Because it's a tough thing to teach. But imagine our kids or even ourselves had to put a presentation together where we showcased careers of great entrepreneurs and highlights their story of persistence. And just talk about the persistence of certain entrepreneurs that would go through lows and highs and lows and highs. And in that process of presenting about them and studying them, they would understand that all successes have a process of roller coaster emotions to get to them, and that would develop their understanding and their clarity on the need for grit to get what it is they want. So I have another 8 subjects that I've worked out and researched, and I believe that all of us need to be retraining ourselves in these new types of skill sets, like storyteller, passion-led, or developing the grit that we require for this new adaptable, multifaceted world that's coming. You're muted.
Yeah, little noise, trying to keep all the noise out of the background. It's pouring outside, so it continues to do so. So we have these skills. Obviously, we need to adapt. The other part of this equation is, what's your vision, or kind of what insights can you provide? Well, actually, let's talk about that in a second. You talk about the 4 sights. So as soon as I said insight, you talk about your not only foresight, but you talk about hindsight, insight, foresight. So I do read you. I do follow you, John.
Thank you.
I think that's a great reference point before we get into looking at what the future of work is. And then also I want to follow up, especially in today's need, the future of leadership.
Sure. So look, for many years spoke about the future to organizations and governments. And what I realized that very few people actually were changing their behavior in line with this future. And so I would speak to organizations, do the strategy sessions, everybody was positive, and I would go back and pretty much nothing had changed. And so then I started writing this book called Foresight. And I broke it down into understanding the different sights we have as human beings. And by sight, I don't only mean this sight, but I mean perspective of sight. And so the first sight that I broke down in that book was hindsight. And hindsight are people that live in their memories and keep repeating their memories. There's a great saying from Dr. Joe Dispenza. He says, are you living a life based on a set of memories from your past, or are you living a life based on the vision of your future? And many people are in repetition of their pasts, expecting a different outcome, but really just living the same life over and over and over. And businesses and people in positions of executive power are really kind of trying to relive their past and do it just a bit better. And if you're living in hindsight, you're never able to prepare for the future, because you're much more focused on your past and repeating it than you are actually developing anything new and working towards it. And most of the world is stuck in hindsight without even realizing that they're stuck in hindsight. The second sight that I unpacked is plain sight. The people that are the logical thinkers, they don't like any idea around what we perceive as what we receive. They are not thinkers or believers in quantum science. What they are is believers in Newton science or Newtonian science. And Newtonian science says for every action, there's a reaction. Quantum science says you are the reaction. You are the one who is actually creating what you need to be seeing and receiving and projecting and expecting. All of it's you. None of it's anybody else's. And it's funny because as human beings, what we do is we love to take ownership of the cool things that we create or the synergies, but the bad things are never us. That's somebody else or the government or whoever it is, not us. And so we fall into a state of victimhood when we're in plain sight. And then you get insight. And insights are the people with the incredible levels of education, the ones that have got all the degrees ready, geared, and tooled up for a complicated world. Those people are in high levels of insight. But what foresight is, for me, is the level of heart-led decision-making based on what makes you curious, adaptable, optimistic, and excited. Because when you start making decisions from that place, when you break out the mindset that you have to be following a degree to become successful, when you can realize that your uniqueness, your combination of topics, no matter what field or sector that is in, will actually be your most powerful version of yourself. Because what you want to do is you want to include or infuse or focus your life on what makes time disappear. And when you are doing something that makes time disappear, you're now in your flow state. And when you're in your flow state, you're at your most curious, you're at your most creative. And so foresight is the combination of brain, heart coherence so that you can have this very elegant, calm, focused energy and access to this collaborative process of innovation and disruptive ideas. So you have to ask yourself a question, both in your organization as well as in yourself. Are you living in hindsight, plain sight, insight, or are you ready for some foresight?
So applying that, moving to foresight, which is how I jumped into this. I think I said insight, but we'll talk about foresight. What are you looking for? What do you know, what can you share where the work is going to be? I mean, at least in the U.S., where there's still a lot of the population, if they're not unemployed, they're still working from home, expecting we're going to go back to normal. Again, you for anybody who's been on one of my podcasts or webinars in the past, I don't know if you know this. I wrote an obituary to normal, that normal died.
Yeah. So
there's a lot of people mourning normal. We're hoping that we're going to bring it back to life. That's not going to happen. We're going to phase into this FutureNEXT, where you are. What's FutureNEXT look like? Especially, and again, trying to put this in context for work.
Well, look, I mean, I think the thing is there are so many moving parts in this process that it's very difficult to give any concrete anchor points into the future. What I can tell you is that the era of safe employment is well and truly over. No matter how much you work, how hard you work, how long you've been at a company, how well you're educated, if you have your future in the hands of an organization, they cannot guarantee your future. They cannot guarantee anything, in fact, anymore. And the only thing that you can guarantee in the future is your own ability to become the business of you. And the business of you is never disruptible because there is no other you. And the way you bring your combined skills to the world is no way that anybody else can copy it. So the best example I give is myself, is because I've never been to university. I lecture at some of the top universities in the world now. I've never been in corporates. I now help some of the biggest corporates in the world now. And all of it is based on my unique combination of human psychology, neuroscience, futurism, and business strategy. And this combination is so unique that nobody else is doing it. So I really don't have anybody else competing in my world, which means that I'm not relying on anybody to guarantee anything for me. And so the era of forced entrepreneurship, the era of the business of you, I think is the future of work. And slowly but surely, we'll start to see the disintegration of the hierarchical organizational structures, and they'll start moving to much more networked, much more symbiotic sorts of models that morph between open and closed and big and small, different projects of people coming together to achieve similar outcomes for short periods of time. So that is definitely something that we're starting to see. And also, look, if you look at any of the digital nomads around the world, those were a far-reaching left field group of people. And now there's many, many, many more of them. In fact, I've become one of them. And so more and more people are picking up this sort of habits. And look, if you are employed, it's great. But the sooner you can get out into a place of adding value yourself to the world and partnering and collaborating with other people to help you innovate, the better for you. And guess what? The best thing for your kids, because your kids can't hear a word you're saying because your actions are so loud. So make your actions louder so that they can follow your way of becoming this type of entrepreneur and being adaptable in the future.
And this the last few months might have been a good thing for a lot of people because they've learned to collaborate remotely. Because I think before was, even if you were part of the gig economy, you went to work, you got retained or hired by a company, and they gave you an office and a place to work while you were there for a few months. And then all of a sudden you couldn't do that anymore. So again, that digital collaboration, to be able to use, even something simple as a Google Doc or, that you can share. And it's pretty amazing because I've gone up and looked and go, hey, who's editing my doc?
Yeah. While I'm looking at it.
Same time.
It's kind of spooky, right? Yeah, it's spooky. I know.
It is. But all of a sudden we took this giant leap forward where, I was talking about the shift or the Googleization, the exponential change. Everybody has their own term for it. And we were anticipating that people would fight and kick to get there. And then all of a sudden it was there. And now people say, this isn't so bad. I don't have to commute. I don't have an hour or 2 hour commute each way. I don't have to take that subway. I'm saving a ton of money. I didn't realize how much money I was saving on commuting. Even me, and I didn't commute. I mean, I've worked, I've been virtual for a long time. But we have one car is parked in the garage. I'm still in the same tank of gas that I was in March. That's a lot of money.
Yeah. Look, I think the thing is what we have to realize is that 2030 arrived 10 years earlier than we expected.
Yeah, no, exactly right. Yeah.
And none of us
in the fall, Workforce 2030. And
Yeah.
I said, whatever you think is going to happen in 2050, think it's going to be 2030. Whatever is going to be 2030 was 2025. Well, it turned out to be 6 months later, it turned out to be 2020. You know,
go ahead.
So let's put I want to tap on this too, because I think this is important. And especially, US, we've got a huge election coming up. We got divided sides, but worldwide. Before when we were in the green room before this, you and I were chatting, and we were talking about leadership, and where even is bad that we think that the response has been here. And this isn't a political statement, but it could have been better. Even if you don't think it was bad, it could have been better. That there's a leadership void, there's a gap. And you were talking about it in Africa, all the countries have an immaturity on leadership. How does well, obviously if leaders need to have foresight, but how do you see that evolving? What is this a wake-up call? Is it going to, how is this going to help us in growing more mature leaders for a future next world?
So great question. I think what we are seeing right now is there's a book called The Fourth Turning. I'm sure you know about it. It's about the guys who came up with the generational archetypes. But what they've been explaining throughout their book and their sort of cycle of thinking is that every 80 years or so, the young generation pushes out the old generation. So I think that the people that are in power and in leadership now have got the skill sets required for leadership 20 years ago. Their understanding of leadership is based on old ways of thinking, old ideas of success. And we see that the younger generation has just had enough of the older generation and the way they go about practicing leadership. So leadership is not about new practices. It's about new principles and a deep human philosophical discussion we actually need to have. And look, this happens in all fields of human endeavor. It's happened in physics, in medicine. It's happening in climate change right now. And it comes to a point that you cannot solve new problems using old ways. And so if we realize that the principles of bureaucracy, of formalization, specialization, standardization are great if your goal is efficiency at scale. But today, the world doesn't need efficiency at scale. It needs adaptability at scale. And so we have to realize that it's not just the coronavirus that's done this. We've also had the fear of climate change, or the reality of climate change happening around us, ethnic conflict, mass economic migration, cyber threats, job displacement. There's so many moving parts that the leadership are really out of their depth. They don't understand how they want to go about doing this, because ultimately most leaders are addicted to power and they can't let go of their power. They don't trust the younger generation to do a better job. And that's where the real immaturity lies, is that they are totally out of their depths in understanding this new world. Every time you watch the Senate interview anybody in tech, you can see how out of touch they are with what's actually going on in the ground. And a lot of leaders want their organizations to seem agile, but really are unwilling to dedicate themselves to the principles of autonomy, speed, transparency, meritocracy, and experimentation. The older generation can't actually let go of the old ways of thinking. And so it's like almost a dictator holding an election. It's got all the trappings of democracy, but there's the spirit of this new type of leadership is totally missing from these old school types of leaders. And these old school type of leaders have been focused on economies of scale, because that's what's been shoved down our throats through accounting and economics and through every type of business formula or business degree that anybody got. It was all about economies of scale. And these leaders are all following that doctrine. But today we find ourselves in the need of economies of learning. And so we have to move from this hierarchical process to a networked one. And it's not really a bureaucracy that's stifling us. It's our addiction to power. And it's our leaders that don't want to let go of that power. And the new world we're in right now doesn't need power over anymore. It needs power with. And this is the new type of power, which is actually a much more feminine power and not less a young, immature, masculine power. And so we have to realize that the world we're living in right now doesn't just require a new principle. It actually requires a new philosophy.
I put this up here, John, the book Aftershock. You can see it over here. I know you contributed a chapter in that. I saw that the other day. I was excited to see that you were part of that. Almost a year ago, I had interviewed Daniel Levine, who also was part of this, and he has a company, and I always screw up the name, but basically it's like Wiki Trends, and every day he posts trends similar to what Singularity University does, and he posts them. And we interviewed him a year ago, and I forgot that I had actually quoted Alvin Toffler in my book. It was actually one of the opening quotes in there. And for anybody, I assume you were a young man at the time, I still have the original copy. It's right by me. So yeah, it's a thick book, yellowed pages. One is I suggest people picking it up if you can. I think it's in print. It's really interesting, but the references, there's a lot of references in there that obviously don't make sense anymore. But what it was is Alvin Toffler had felt that we would reach a state in the future that we would be so stressed and disillusioned by the accelerating pace of change. Now, he talked about it. His fear was technology would create that, and it did to some extent. And whether the pandemic caused the stress and disillusionment and change, or it accelerated the impact of technology, whether it was just a catalyst for that change, really doesn't matter. The outcome's the same. We're here. And we are stressed and disillusioned. And he described it as a disease, and the disease was future shock. Well, I didn't realize, I forgot that it was 50 years later. And they put together, I don't know how many people were in here, you might know that, but I know you were one of them, and Daniel and a few other, Jason Schenker, who I know, a few other people were in there, and you each contributed a chapter on what you believe is going to be the next 50 years. So I highly encourage everybody to go out there. But hey, congratulations. It was an honor.
Look, it was an absolute delight when my essay was accepted. To be amongst some of these top futurists in the world was just an extraordinary privilege. So it was almost like I've been watching Roger Federer my whole life, and the next thing I'm playing tennis with him. So it's that sort of thing being in this book. But yes, Aftershock was a great coming together of different theories and different ideas, and I also really enjoyed reading some of the essays.
And you can get the Kindle version. There's a hardcover version that you can get up on Amazon. I'd certainly highly recommend everybody does it. And the fact is that if you don't like one essay, you can flip on to the next. There's a lot of essays in there. They're like reading short stories, and I'd encourage you, because it's going to follow up. It'll be a good follow up. In addition to waiting for John's book, FutureNEXT, that's coming out. Your current latest book is Foresight, correct? That's the third. Yeah.
So I've decided to write a book every year, because it's the only way you become good at something and get known better and better. So for me, FutureNEXT comes out in the next 2 months, and I'm excited about it.
Good. We'll have to get you back on. We'll have to, and remind everybody. We'll be. I'm sure people will be listening this for a while, so that'll be great. And for reference, we're in the beginning of August, so somewhere in September, October, right? Here is the expectation. If anybody has any questions, please post them in the chat.
I see one from. Yeah, you just responded. That's right. I don't know how to say your name. I'm just going to say Isaac. Yes, economies of learning instead of economies of scale. And I think there's another question there. What is the one skill that we need for this new normal? And the skill for me is a combination of curiosity and robust expression. And by that, I mean, you need to express your skill sets and your curiosity in as many different ways as possible, because you have no idea, and nobody else does, what's going to be big and what's not going to be big. And so, there's a jewelry designer and an artist that lives in the forests of Sweden, and she has a YouTube channel, and her YouTube channel actually makes more money than her jewelry and her art. So, you've got to realize that you've got to be robust in your expression of your curiosity. Those are the two skill sets I recommend, and something I practice myself.
So Adriana had a question. We have two Adrianas, actually. I saw the conversation going on over there. We mentioned a couple of books. One was Aftershock, and you can look at that. It was edited by John Schroeder, but it's Aftershock. But also your new book is FutureNEXT, right?
Yeah,
and
FutureNEXT, yeah.
And your latest book is Foresight. That one's already out. That's available.
Yeah, it's almost as if, Ira, if you think about any books that don't talk about COVID, they almost seem irrelevant to a certain extent because the world has done such a massive change. So FutureNEXT touches on 3 different topics that I think are really important. The first one is the mental and emotional health that we have when we are going through uncertainty is key to bring about some level of clarity in our decision-making process. The second part of the book is really starting to understand to utilize our imagination. And what I do in the second part of the book is try and get people to reimagine a new socio-economic system that's not based on the capitalist world that we know and have become used to, and realize that it's just a type of model of economics. There are many others, and I think it's nice for us to reimagine that, and I share some new ideas around a new socio-economic system. And the third part of the book is a guidebook to how we must show up as citizens, how we must show up as employees, employers, entrepreneurs, and policymakers. What does it mean to be part of a new world? And what does it mean to be the characteristics of a future type of human being, rather than sitting on the sidelines and hoping the government do that? So it's really just a guidebook to try and help people get ready for FutureNEXT.
So we had a couple of questions. The FutureNEXT, by the way, will be available in 2 months, about 2 months.
Yes.
I did post, while we were talking about change, I got to plug my book as well. It's my show. I get it, right?
Yeah, of course.
Very easy. You can go to besthrbook.com. It was hard to believe. I just picked that up a couple weeks ago, and although the book's been out a while. Many of you have already read it. It's Recruiting in the Age of Googlization, but don't be turned off by the recruiting part. The first 130 pages was originally going to be when the shift hits your plan. It's all about exponential change. Things we're talking about that, scenarios of what autonomous vehicles are going to do. And it was really interesting because I wrote about the thing with autonomous vehicles is every time you talk about it, people say, we'll never have self-driving cars. It's going to be years in advance, and it's not going to happen. It'll happen in rural areas. It'll never happen in the cities. And then all of a sudden, what the pandemic did was everybody was home. And convenience stores that depended on traffic driving by did not have traffic driving by, and convenience stores turned into the local grocery store because they weren't pumping gas, they weren't selling gas. So all those businesses that depended on autonomous vehicles or on vehicle traffic went away, and that was just sort of a snapshot into what the future was going to be like, because autonomous vehicles will change. And I think now that a lot of people have stopped commuting, there's going to be a collateral effect of that, or a downstream effect. But that's what the first half of the book's about. So if you only read the first 130 pages, you have no interest in recruitment, what it's going to be like to get a job, you can stop there, but I hope you go up. And the best thing about besthrbook.com, the book's free. You go up there, you just pay for shipping. Now, I know I have a couple international people on here. I know Ibi is from Nigeria. I don't think we're shipping to Nigeria, but I can send you a digital copy. So if you go up there and you can't order the paperback, then let me know. I appreciate that. And then you can also I put John's website in there. You can go up to John's website. He's got his books up there for free, not for free, but available. Or you can get them on Amazon as well. So, John, I know I said I'd keep you about 45 minutes. I lied a little bit. We're a little bit late. We had a great conversation. The feedback's been tremendous. Everybody's been enjoying it. What's a kind of a final word, and then how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, good. Look, I think we must realize we are in a transformation of the deepest of levels. Transformations always have, wow, Laura, CT, where's that? I'm from CT. It's Cape Town. Okay, different CT to me. I was like, no way, I'm in Cape Town.
Yeah, I know Laura. I know Laura, so I know it was not your CT.
Okay. So look, we must realize that we are in a transformation, and a transformation has 3 different sections. It has the goodbye of familiarity, no man's land, and then the momentum of the new world. Many of us are still saying goodbye or in no man's land. It's an exhausting time. It's a winter when it comes to our emotions. It's a winter when it comes to us trying to figure out new things. So be kind on yourself, be patient with yourself, because we still have a couple more years to go until the momentum kicks in again. So just survive, recreate, rethink what you have to do. And then when spring starts, and I mean in years, not the season itself, then at least you'll be prepared. I am the only John Sanei in the world. I've looked it up a few times, which is quite funny.
That's an accomplishment in itself.
What a win.
There's actually enough. There's multiple Ira Wolfes, which you would not think. I didn't think so. Well, but anyway, go ahead, John.
Yeah, I didn't think your name. I would think you would be the only one. But anyway, here I am, John Sanei. So Instagram and LinkedIn are the best places. I'm constantly sharing videos and books and stuff online just to add some value to the population. So join me on there. Lovely to see you. And thank you so much, Ira. It's been wonderful chatting to you.
No, it's been my pleasure. You and I can talk all day, and I think everybody was on the call can probably do that as well. Just a couple of quick announcements. Let me just go back to here. And for those who didn't know, I mean, I know a lot of you are familiar with who I am and what I do in the business. My logo, as John just said, the shift, going back, what was the first stage? You said
goodbye. You mean goodbye to the familiar, no man's land, and the new world?
By the way, this is the logo. This is goodbye to the familiar.
Yes.
That's the edge of the paradigm shift. This is the new coming up, and this is the chaos in between.
Nice. Oh, that's perfect. I love that. Wow.
So I don't think many people knew that. I've had that logo for almost 24 years of my business.
Wow.
It was designed, and and again, it sort of gets lost in the meshes. I think everybody knows what it represents, but apparently not. So next week we're going to continue this conversation. I know we had so many nice comments here. Appreciate that. You've been great, John. You're going to really enjoy Dr. Diane Hamilton next week. We're going to be talking about the Curiosity Code. This will be a segue in there. So this is going to be really important because, again, talking about what you need to do to develop your adaptability. Your emotional intelligence is also a skill that's going to be required, and also kids as far as what we need to be doing in education. And then following that, we're going to be doing quantifying equity. Going to be another important topic, a little bit more on the science end of that, but certainly an important subject if we really are serious about taking diversity and inclusion to the next level and doing that right. You'll get emails about it, but you can actually just use the same crowdcast.io/Ira Wolfe. Go to Crowdcast, you'll find me, and you'll be able to register there. John, thank you very, very much. You stay safe. Hopefully you'll be in the U.S. one of the days we get to meet, or we can travel and meet somebody. I know I'm going to see you online quite a bit. You created a whole lot of new fans today.
Thank you.
In fact, you're going to see some new traffic. Everyone else, especially those in the U.S., but worldwide, please stay safe. Wear the mask. Keep your social distancing. Let's get over this. There is a future. There's FutureNEXT. We're going to live to see it. We want to get there faster than you thought. So hopefully today's session helped. Until next week, bye everybody. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.